projections released by the U.S. Census Bureau, millennials are now the largest living generation in the country, with numbers pushing towards 80 million. But quickly emerging is a new generation known as Generation Z, slated to be the next big thing for market researchers and trend forecasters. Please welcome millennial lifestyle expert and TV and radio host Vonny Sweetland. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing? I'm so excited to talk about
Thank you
this.
for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I was reading about you and reading about this kind of trend research, and it's fascinating to me. So help me out with the definitions. Millennials?
We're between the ages of 20 and 35.
Okay. So between 1980 and 1995 for birth.
Right.
Roughly 20 to 35 right now, as you say. Okay. Generation Z, the next group, how old are they?
So they're the generation just after us. They're generally between the ages of 2 and 19.
Okay, and so how are they different, and why does this matter so much?
I think they're actually strikingly different, and it kind of upsets me because we get grouped with them so often. Millennials are people who embrace digital technology, but they're true digital natives. And I think oftentimes, you know, they think of millennials and say, oh, well, we live in a digital bubble, we can't come outside of it, we don't know how to communicate. I would actually attribute that to Generation Z, not so much us. That's just me, though. I'm a millennial. I'm going to be honest. I'm a millennial. So
I have
I'm
a
biased.
millennial as my son, and his friends do not seem to fit the stereotype. I feel like millennials are getting maligned a good bit these days. I'm taking it you feel the same way.
I do. It was nice. Again, we chatted before we came on air, and so I appreciate that comment very much from a boomer, you know.
From a boomer, yeah. I mean, we were as obnoxious as they come at that age, so I don't know why we would be complaining about millennials.
Yeah, we get a lot of flack.
So in terms of why this is important, people who sell things, Apple, you know, everybody else wants to know what are the characteristics of these groups as they grow in their buying power. So what is it that we'll learn about millennials turning things over to Generation Z? And if you guys grew up as digital natives, what are they?
They're digital natives.
Also.
I think, and like I said earlier, we embrace technology, but they grew up with it. They don't know anything else. So a world that doesn't have Apple products is like, what's that? You know, whereas with us, we had yo-yos and hula hoops and made our way into computers. So it's, you know, it's different.
Another thing that seems different, as I was reading about this, is that you guys did grow up during the time of 9/11 and some other kind of seminal things that happened and changed our perception of the world while you were at very impressionable ages, whereas Generation Z has never known anything but what we're experiencing internationally now. Is that an important distinction?
Very much so. I think, like you just mentioned, with millennials, it's a true story of innocence lost, right? So we grew up in the 90s when everything was peaceful, the economy was doing great, and then September 11th happened. There was, you know, economic crises and a lot of stuff that happened that kind of just almost like shattered our snow globe of a world, if that makes sense. Whereas with Generation Z, their eyes have been open the entire time, like that's all they know.
Right, and I was thinking about that also in terms of like jobs, because the end of the millennials and Generation Z are the ones who are kind of freaking out about, oh my gosh, I'm coming out of college and there are no jobs, whereas as you said, you know, people who grew up in the 90s when things were just kind of booming along, they weren't worried about that when they were coming out of school at all.
No, not so much. And actually, millennials are the most educated generation in the United States. 63% of us have degrees. Whereas with Generation Z, because of things like, you know, economic downturn, they are not really quick to go and spend money on a loan and going to college, and they would rather maybe go take an apprenticeship program, and they just, you know, they just don't want to take that chance.
That makes total sense to me. So now we've got a lot of millennials, but we have even more Generation Z, right?
No, right now there's 76 million millennials.
Okay, so you're the biggest group. Okay.
We're the largest generation to date, more than boomers now.
So who's like who? Are boomers more like you guys or more like the Z people?
More like Z people. Definitely
Really?
More like Z people, yeah.
And why is that?
I think, you know, boomers post-World War II, they kind of seen a lot of similar things, right? So recession, social change, social issues, and that's a lot like Generation Z, and that's why they're so invested in social change and, you know, political revolution and whatnot.
Yeah,
So.
well, that's true. I mean, we grew up with Political assassinations, the Vietnam War, Watergate, and yeah, there was kind of that innocence lost as well. So what would you recommend, since you study this and you talk to people, we've already talked about millennials kind of getting a bad rap, so one thing we should do is maybe just cut that out.
Cut that out a little bit.
People are people. How do we communicate with each other?
Between millennials and...
All of us. You know, how do we sort of understand the different generations, what we have in common and what we don't, that could facilitate more discussion?
I think the key thing would be to just have an open mind, and I think that's what's lacking for the most part, especially, you know, with boomers. I know that they tend to put us in a box a little bit. Just keep an open mind, try to be understanding.
And vice versa?
And vice versa, yeah, for sure. Oh, absolutely. We've got some teamwork going on, okay?
Exactly. We're down with the same idea
Yeah.
here. That's great. Thank you so much. Those are really interesting ideas and gives us something to think about.
Something to think about, yeah.
An open mind will not hurt you. After the break, just in time for outdoor weather, a look at some of the region's lesser known but totally awesome parks. We'll be right back. Thank you so much.